Motor vehicles is number one. And it's number one, not by a little bit, it's by far.
Our road toll nationally has been going up year on year for the last 4 years. Now, that in itself should be a massive red flag.
So, good morning.
Good morning, Kylie.
Morning.
Russell, great to see you again.
Great to be back and what a great event. I mean, so many great exhibitors and so many great sessions. So, awesome to be part of it.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming along, Russell. We really appreciate you being part of the PIEF conference. And Michael,
Yes.
Michael Walsh, GIO, how you going?
Good. And it's a great event. I think this event gets bigger and bigger every time I'm here. It's, I think from years ago, from where it is now, it's great. It's the evolved kind of component of this whole conference. It definitely is. It has definitely evolved, which is great to see.
No, well, thank you again for joining us in the podcast. But Russell, if I can start with you, your session today was really powerful. Some great messages there for all of us when we think about road safety and the impact that we can have. What are the key messages that you really wanted us to take away and put into practice in our business where we can?
Yeah, Kylie, I think the big thing, and I probably should say too, I'm Russell White from the Australian Road Safety Foundation. So our entire focus is about improving road safety outcomes right across the country. And I think one of the critical things that I've just found over the decades that has been probably underrepresented or under-focused on has been this whole area of work-related road safety. And so when we start looking at statistics and we realise that being on the road is going to be the biggest risk that an organisation is going to have, quite often it's just not managed in the same way as other risks, like slip, a trip, a fall, those other things which people might automatically go, oh, that's a workplace risk. But we have to remember our vehicles are our workplace. It's in legislation. The documentation around all that is really clear. And yet, when we talk to organisations around the country, some do it very well. A lot have very little idea about the risk and the exposure. And when you do shine that light on it and say to people, well, being on the road, no matter how, if they're driving for work purposes, if they're on the road for work purposes, that's the big risk, and you have to do something to manage that. So for us, that's the big thing. It's about shining the light on that issue and then trying to make everybody aware of the responsibilities that we have in terms of managing our safety for people on the road.
Completely agree. So, Michael, when we think about our employers that we work with every day,
absolutely.
What can they do?
To Russell's point, when you're looking at the focus, I think if you look at the amount of motor vehicle accidents you have on the road, but then you put that into context of fatalities for a workplace, motor vehicles is number one.
Number one.
And it's number one, not by a little bit, it's by far. And that, even those statistics, when I even saw that, that's jolting. And to me, it's an employer. What am I doing to making sure my workforce gets home at night? Making sure I'm aware of the risks and what can I do to mitigate those risks. So that's probably the biggest focus is, well, how can I know what those risks are in my organisation? Have I actually mapped that out? What do they actually look like? The people getting to places now, it changes, it evolves within industries. If we look at all types of industries, obviously transport comes to mind when everyone thinks of road transport. That's their biggest risk. And yes, absolutely. And over the years, they've done a lot to mitigate those processes in place. They've got fatigue management programs. They've got chain of responsibility processes. But it's those other industries that don't necessarily have the same focus. That's where I think there's the opportunity. It's for all industries to really focus in on what can we do. You look at the healthcare industry. It's an evolving industry as well. A lot of community care, and healthcare industry. Your utilities industry. People are out on the road. They're not necessarily drivers. Their occupation's not being a driver, but it's still part of their role to get to either the place they're doing business or between clients or between different sites. So that's where we need to focus on. We need to focus on, well, how we, as an employer, how is my workforce getting to those places and how are they doing it safely?
Have we got an example of an employer that's doing a really great job at implementing these strategies into their organisation that we can look to?
Absolutely. I think the very first thing you've got to look at as an employer, and I'm seeing a lot of employers are starting to shift this focus, is accountability. what is my accountability look like? And is my workforce aware of their own accountability when it comes to road safety? So just having the assumption that someone has a driver's license, that's great, but we need to also work out what's the due diligence process in that? Have we actually verified what type of vehicles are they using? So, companies are starting to look at that. And if they don't have their own fleet that they're looking at, they're even looking at grey fleet management of people using their own vehicles. And I think that's probably a big gap still we're seeing across different industries. But some employers now, a lot of employers now are starting to focus on that because exactly what Russell said, it is part of the workplace when they're using it as a workplace tool.
I think Michael's touched on a couple of points there. The whole thing, I think when people think about work-related road safety, I think the default mentality is to think big truck. So often when you talk to organisations, they'll say, "Oh, we're doing all this for our heavy vehicles," and then you ask the question, "What are you doing for your light vehicle fleet?" And they'll go, "Oh, not sure." So, and Michael's point's valid too. It's not just the branded vehicle. It's also if they're using their grey fleet, it's their personal vehicle. So if they're using the vehicle for any means, for work purposes, there's a responsibility and an obligation there. And also to pick up on another point, that's a two-way street. So that obligation applies to the employer, but also the employee has to be doing everything they can be doing to be safe. And that old saying that, well, I've got the driver's license, what else there is there to learn? Well, the actual fact there's a lot more to it. The license just means you're legal. It doesn't mean that it translates into safe. And I think maybe to touch on a point you raised before, I think when I've seen organisations doing it well, they've got really robust policies. It's driven from the top down.
Yep.
So it's a cultural thing. It's not being sort of pushed from the bottom up. It comes from the top down. There's training processes in place. There's regular touch points, even normal communication, safety communication, actually saying that being on the road is our biggest risk. Just that narrative change can make a huge difference into how organisations and people actually have a focus on it. And I've always had that view that if we can improve work-related road safety outcomes, that's going to have a massive change on road safety right across the board.
And I know, Russell, you are a very passionate advocate for road safety. How are governments and regulators approaching this challenge?
I think it's a massive challenge on several fronts. One is that our road toll nationally has been going up year on year for the last 4 years. Now, that in itself should be a massive red flag. I think what tends to happen, government look at it at whether it's federal, state or local, and they'll go, well, it's an infrastructure problem. And yes, infrastructure is part of it. It's not the only thing about it. So I think whilst we need to push for better roads and there's a debate at the moment about speed limits on unsealed roads. Yes, we need to have those conversations, but we also need to look at raising the bar around it. And I do think there has been a lack of commitment and a lack of energy from a government level in this space. I think possibly because they view it as it is too hard, it is tricky, but we are seeing changes with that. And that's one of the things we've been doing with these roundtables that we've been doing right around the country is to get government agencies, to get work safety agencies, corporates together to start having this conversation. Because I think when the penny drops, there are things we can do. In fact, again, I've often said I think work-related road safety is probably our only chance, our best chance to get change quickly, because trying to do it just with the general community, it's going to take longer. But in the workplace, we have levers we can pull to try and do that. So I think it's the foundation's role to work with our partners, to work with government, to change the narrative. Because I just don't think historically it's been on the radar enough. And that's why all this is so important.
Completely agree. So to sum up, Russell, what would be the key takeaways for our PIEF membership and the things that we could do to make a small change?
I think just having that first light bulb moment that being on the road is your team's biggest risk. No matter, as Michael said, whether they're driving, whether it's a gig economy thing, they're on a scooter, they're on a bike, they're on a motorbike, they're a courier, vehicle large or small if it's got wheels, and even for thinking about what you do for pedestrians, just people, how are we getting to work? just that narrative change is important. I think start looking at what policies are in place. To getting leadership buy-in is probably the next thing. And then I think coming up with a system or coming up with regular touch points, whether that's training, whether that's internal comms, just checking licenses.
Yeah.
Even that could be a good start.
Yes.
So I think it is a big job, but I think just start taking bite-sized chunks at it. And part of it is that at least setting the sail, having a philosophy around this is something we're going to focus on, and that's where it really starts.
And Michael, a lot of our PIEF members see the trauma and the outcomes from road accidents. What would be your key takeaways for us?
And I think from a personal injury perspective as well, we know that in a lot of times when there is a motor vehicle accident, injuries that can come from that are complex.
Yes.
They can be multiple. They can be multiple physical injuries sustained by a person, or both, of mental and physical as well. So I think that's the process there. It's not only the prevention. I think that's a critical component and the most important component. But it's also having processes in place should an accident happen.
Yeah.
What's that critical incident process look like as an employer? How you map that in your organisation? What type of training delivery have you given? Because it is, and a lot of times, a very significant event that can occur. So, for a lot of organisations, not having the ability to have that training sometimes can be, very daunting. So, having that proactively done, I think, is a good thing as well. And focusing on how we get people back to work following a motor vehicle accident.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Russell.
Oh,
Appreciate
thanks.
your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Will do.
Absolutely.